So, blessings, good evening. Tonight, Luang Por Liem, our visiting teacher, is resting. He says he's 84 years old now, so his body is not the same as it used to be. So last night he spent the whole night on a plane flying here from Thailand. So tonight we're giving him a rest and he'll give us some teaching in the morning. He said, just now we were talking with him, he said, most people when they're 84 they don't go anywhere. He still has to travel all around the world because the Sangha that he is the spiritual head of has spread all around the world. There are monasteries in almost every continent, and even the continents that might not have a branch monastery of Ajahn Chah, they probably want one, just not enough monks yet to start one. So he's an unusual 84-year-old. He has to still travel. He just came back from one trip to India, where there's a new monastery there, land has been offered. Later in the year he'll be going to the USA, where we have a number of monasteries. So this is part of his life as the abbot of the monastery that Ajahn Chah began all those years ago, 70-odd years ago, Wat Nong Pah Pong. Luang Por Liem became the abbot after Ajahn Chah passed away. And so he inherited pretty much the whole Sangha, which last January we were there for Ajahn Chah's death anniversary and the teachings and event that takes place there every year for that. And there were over 1,000 monks, several hundred nuns, thousands of lay people participating, as well as day visitors, again thousands of day visitors. So Luang Por does an incredible amount of work for Buddhism in Thailand and around the world. So we'll allow him to have a rest tonight. He says if he doesn't rest enough now, he loses his voice. So there's no point him teaching and teaching until his voice stops. Better to preserve his health and then he can teach properly when we invite him. He also just built a hospital, built and equipped a hospital. So his life has been very full, building many monasteries, building hospitals and visiting many monasteries around the world. So he said he was very happy to hear that you were all here today, coming to join this retreat. He knows that you're camping, he's seen your tents, and he told me it's good that the lay people come and stay in the monastery because you learn many things staying with the monastic Sangha. You're learning how to live simply, living in a tent, in the forest, in a quiet place. You learn some personal discipline with your lifestyle, getting up in the morning to meditate, chant, listen to Dhamma, eating just one main meal a day in the morning, spending your time quietly, cultivating mindfulness, cultivating meditation. He said this is a very good thing to do regularly, like we do, because you learn so much. And he also reminded us earlier today of the teaching that Ajahn Chah himself would often quote from the Buddha, what we call the Appanaka Patipata. So Patipata means practice or things that you practice, And it refers to Panaka, the practices that are always fruitful, and we say never wrong, always good, always useful. There's 3 of those. And the first they call Indriya Sangvara, which means sense restraint. You might translate it as. Second is Bojane Matanyuta, which means knowing moderation, particularly in consumption of food, but in the use of all material things. And the last is Chakaryanu Yoga, which means dedication. In the chant we often translate it as dedication to the higher mind. Sometimes in Thai we translate it as dedication to wakefulness. So not being sleepy in particular when you meditate, not falling asleep, which as you know is a big obstacle. So far nobody has been snoring yet, but let's see. So these 3 things Luang Por Liem was emphasizing as the center of our practice on a retreat or just in training yourself generally in meditation and the Buddhist path. And Ajahn Chah would also emphasize them. So Indriya Sangvara, we call sense restraint. So what does that mean? Well, in particular, how you use your senses. So in Buddhism we talk about 6 sense doorways which let in the information from the world or objects from the world. So that's your eyes, you see things, your ears, you hear things, your nose, you smell things, your tongue, you taste things, your skin, you touch things, and then the mind itself, which kind of gathers together all the information from the other 5 physical senses, and they all come into the mind itself. And the mind is also sensing, because you constantly have thoughts and feelings and memories popping into your mind. So these are 6 sense doorways. And what did the Buddha say about these doorways? Well, he said we have to be mindful of our sense contact, because that's where suffering begins. You see something, it gives rise to an unpleasant feeling, and that gives rise to not liking, not wanting. Sometimes we even say it, you see something you don't like, don't want it, don't like it. But it's actually the unpleasant feeling that is prompting that. Or you see something you like, something attractive to you. It could be something beautiful, fascinating, interesting to you. I do want it, I like it. And this is how craving and attachment and the suffering of the mind starts. But just maybe seeing something and then reacting with liking or disliking. And the same for the other senses. So you multiply this by 6. It could be liking, could be disliking, or sometimes could be just a more neutral feeling arises. That's 18. These doorways immediately sort of multiply different reactions that can come up in the mind. So we need to be mindful. And not just when we're in here in the hall meditating or outside doing walking meditation, but just all through your day. In the hall we're not eating, so maybe your tongue has gone to sleep, but you go down to the kitchen, straight away your tongue is looking for tastes you like, avoiding tastes you don't like, whether it's drinks or food. So these sense doorways are constantly bringing us information through the day, and that's partly why we come on retreat, is to become more mindful and aware of all this sense contact. And the simple surroundings, the peace of the forest, everyone's wearing similar clothing, just white coloured simple clothing. We don't have a lot of other activities other than meditation, chanting, listening to talks, eating, walking around, washing your clothes, washing your body. We're not doing a lot. So that helps you with this practice of sense restraint, because your sense contact and your contact with the world is sort of limited or reduced. And that means mindfulness maybe is a little bit more possible. Of course, you can be mindful of sense contact and your senses anytime, any place, but the more impingement, the more things happening, the more confusing it gets. And we know that, you go to work or you go shopping or you go travelling, your senses are bombarded. Taste, smell, touch, so many things going on. Your mind is all over the place, and that's often why we feel tired. Our mental energy is expended running after all these different sense objects. But when you practice sense restraint, you start to limit some of your sense contact. You still have sense contact, you see things, hear things, but less than normal maybe, less diversity, less extremes. You might say less interest. So when you're on retreat, it's a bit boring, isn't it? It's partly because there's less things to contact your senses. But that helps to maintain mindfulness and then to reflect. And that's the point of it. When you practice sense restraint, you bring up the mindfulness so you can reflect what's going on. You can see and know what's going on. And partly you give your mind a rest, not chasing after all these sense objects. Partly you can see the process, how suffering arises, how you attach to the things you like, you want them, crave them, get addicted to them, and how you get aversion, dislike for the things you don't like. But you notice when you're more mindful, you're paying more attention, your mind tends to go to this place in the middle. We call it equanimity, upekkha. So maybe, just sitting here, when you're mindful, even though you may have some pain in your legs, you might have to shift around, move around, that's normal, but perhaps it doesn't bother you too much because you're just mindful, there's this painful feeling, the contact between my legs and the ground, or the stiffness in the body. Or maybe the feeling of the air on your skin, because it's hot. Today is very hot, so you might feel, it's really hot. You feel hot, feel the heat, feel the sweat. But when you're mindful, you just know it. It just feels like that. And you're more calm, equanimous when you're mindful. But what's it like when you lose your mindfulness? You're not aware, you get caught into your reaction, your mood. So you might say, it's too hot. We bring in all these descriptions of what's going on. It's too hot. Or my legs hurt too much. Can't do it, can't meditate, can't do this, can't do that. It's too this, too that. In the case of painful feeling, or if it's something you like, maybe it's some food or drink you have in the monastery, you like this, I really like this. I haven't had this for so long, I like it. And you keep eating, maybe because you like it. So you'll notice this, because you're in this quiet environment, you'll notice your sense contact, what you like, what you don't like, and you can practice more keeping your mind in the middle, just knowing without grasping at it or holding on to it. So it's not wrong to like things or dislike, but you have to know yourself. Then you can start letting go of the suffering. Because if you don't know yourself, you just get caught into it. It becomes a habit, and the things you like, you keep craving, wanting to get more of, indulging in, chasing after. Maybe tomorrow you watch at the mealtime, if there's a food you like, you just want to keep scooping it onto your plate. Your hand won't stop, because you like it. And then the things you don't like, you want to get rid of. Don't like this, don't want this. If it builds up too much, maybe you just have the thought, I want to get out of here. I don't want retreat anymore. I want to go home. Strong aversion tends to multiply like that. But when you're mindful, you're just knowing, oh, this is pleasant, oh, this is unpleasant, it's like this. And you keep your mind aware, but you're not lost in the craving and the moods. That's your goal. So Indriya Sangvara is something the forest masters like Luang Por Liem emphasize over and over again. And they practice it. I've known Luang Por Liem for 40 years, and you can see him even from 1977, which is almost 50 years ago, in the documentary The Mindful Way, which is on YouTube. They made it about Ajahn Chah and his teachings, his monastery, but Luang Por Liem is in that, making a bowl stand, weaving rattan into a bowl stand. He's always been very mindful, had this very strong level of sense restraint, and very equanimous. So, in the old days when Luang Por Liem would hardly talk, people would say, I don't know what he likes, I don't know what he doesn't like, because he's very restrained and mindful. People wouldn't be sure, what food does he like, what does he do, what does he think? They're not sure, because he wouldn't display his likes and his dislikes very much at all. When he became abbot of Wat Nong Pah Pong, that continued. So when you're abbot of an important, well-known monastery like Wat Nong Pah Pong, Ajahn Chah's monastery, both monks, nuns, lay people come to the monastery, everyone comes and they've all got an opinion how the monastery should be run, what's the best way, what's the right thing to build, what's the right project to do, what's the right event to hold, and the way to do it. And every day they would come to Luang Por Liem, you should do this, you should do that, it should be like this, it should be like that. And I can say this because I've sat and witnessed it so many times. And Luang Por Liem would keep his sense restraint, hearing all these views and opinions. And you really would get the impression, oh, it's just sound waves coming to his ear. It's just like wind comes to the ear and then passes away. Sometimes people will be very emotional. Luang Por, you got to do this. This has got to be done like this. And they're very angry, upset about something, or very uptight. It's just like wind coming to the ear of Luang Por Liem. Good news, bad news. He always was very cool, calm, and mindful. So I've had the privilege of knowing him for 40 years of my life as a monk, and he's been a very good example of sense restraint. So he doesn't just teach it, he practices it. Indriya Sangvara. Another one of these three practices is Bojane Matanyuta. So Matanyuta means keeping your mind in the middle, being modest. Bojane means food, consumption of food, but can also refer to, say, medicines and clothing and accommodation. So Luang Por praised you all for staying in tents. So already you've got one tick against your name. The box is ticked. Doing well, although you haven't completed one night yet. Maybe we'll tick the box tomorrow morning when you've passed through one night. And it will get a bit colder tonight, and the floor can be hard. But living in a tent is a very good practice because you're practicing moderation. It's the opposite of 5-star hotel, penthouse suite, mansion, palace, all the things human beings like to dream about or build or buy. A tent is the complete opposite. It's just very simple, like a monk living in the forest, tudong. People always ask, they put up their tent and they say, oh, what animals do you have here? Do you have ants, insects? Do the kangaroos attack you? Well, as you'll find, the kangaroos will probably just avoid you. They came down just now and saw you all and quickly bounced away. Didn't like the look of you, so you're safe. That's what a tent is, isn't it? A tent is as simple as it gets. Doesn't give you much protection, but it gives you enough from the rain, the sun, the wind, the kangaroos. So it's being very modest, simple. And that will help you just to bring your mind back to your body, to the present moment. Because when you get into more luxurious accommodation, luxurious food, you go out to a restaurant, it's all about choosing, following desire, indulging, and you don't even realize it's so automatic and so quick. As you come into a retreat, simple accommodation, simple one meal food, not much furnishing, sitting on the floor, it puts you under a little bit of pressure, true. You have to be patient with some pain, some difficulty maybe. You're exposed to the weather, but you're also seeing and knowing your own body, your own mind, right up close. Because what does luxury do? Luxury makes you very kind of dull. Any desire you have, you follow it. You want to be warmer, you turn on the aircon. You want to be cooler, you turn on the aircon. You want to be warmer, you put on the heater. You want to sit on your nice sofa, you want to eat whatever food you want, when you want. You know, retreats are not like that. Retreat is simple. So you see your mind, your desires come up. And you still get to satisfy some desire, but not all. And that's what we call moderation. Bhojane matanyuta, the Buddha didn't mean starve yourself or make yourself physically ill or in pain all the time. But he did mean to limit the desire of the mind, put some limits on it, so that you can know your own mind better. And Luang Por earlier was talking a lot about food and modern diet. The world has changed over our lifetime, his lifetime, from being where a huge number of people in the world have problems, say, with starvation, poverty, which is still there, but the more modern problem now is too much, obesity, and too many things. And everyone has a phone, everyone has cars and houses and too much food. And that brings a lot of problems as well. Now the problem is we eat too much of the wrong food, unhealthy food, and so we get a lot of health problems associated with our diet. Too much cholesterol, too much sugar, too much this, too much that. So Bhojane Matanyuta is partly about that, learning what is the right amount of food, what is the right type of food. Luang Por said if you're really practicing Bhojane Matanyuta, tomorrow when you eat your meal you should only fill up 80% of your stomach. The rest should be water. Just take extra water, which is good because it's very hot at the moment. But don't eat too much, because most of us overeat. Because there's a lot of food around these days, even in monasteries, a lot of food, and in the world as a whole. So it's good for the world if we practice Bhojane Matanyuta. The resources of the world, the food products and other resources are distributed more evenly if we don't indulge, we don't eat too much, we don't waste too much. And it's good for our health, our individual health. And it will reduce the amount of illness and health issues you have, particularly later in life. So, when you take your food tomorrow, you just have one dish, you put everything on there, you just work out how much food you need. If you're keeping the 8 precepts, you're not like those visitors to the monasteries. Oh, I need one dish for my main course, and one dish for my dessert, and one dish for my salad. And those people, they're not keeping the 8 precepts, they're indulging. It's just they bring that habit from their home with them to the monastery, and they expect many dishes, many people washing up, and it's very wasteful. It's quite hard to teach people not to do that in the monastery. But on the retreat, you just take one dish. If you're taking 2, you're breaking the rules of the monastery. So you should remember that. You don't need a second dish for your dessert. You eat your dessert on your first dish. You can eat your main meal first and then eat your dessert or your salad, but you don't need many dishes, many spoons and forks and knives. You look at the monks, they just have one bowl, one spoon if they need it. Some monks just eat with their hands. This is what we call moderation in living, in consumption. Because when you practice moderation, you limit it, you know what you're doing. When it's unlimited, we just eat what we want, sleep when we want, build big buildings and indulge in penthouses and 5-star suites. We lose track of our body, our mind, we're not mindful anymore. Generally, that's what happens, isn't it? So don't underestimate the value of learning to live in a tent, eat one meal a day, simple accommodations, simple furnishings. This will help you to be more mindful, get your mind under control. You don't need to look at other people either. It's another thing people do on retreat. You look across at the next person, oh, they're eating too much, their tent is too big, I got a 1-man tent, 1-woman tent, they've got a 5-man, 5-woman tent. Where did they get that tent from? The Buddha wouldn't have had a tent like that. Don't get caught into judging and looking at other people, just get on with your own practice. That's why we're here. So mindfulness of what you're consuming. It's not wrong to consume, but just think about it first. What is the right amount? How much? Then your life becomes simple and you become healthier. The last one, Kalyano yoga, dedication to wakefulness. They call wakefulness the higher mind, because the higher mind is a well-developed mind of samadhi that supports insight, wisdom. So obviously if you're asleep, you can't have much samadhi or wisdom. Doesn't mean to say you can't sleep when you practice, but when you're meditating, your aim is to be awake, not to be sitting there snoring, sleeping. If you're sleepy, you can get up and walk. That's dedication to the higher mind, the wakeful mind. You do walking. If you're very sleepy, you can't overcome your sleepiness sitting, then get up. Your aim is to keep awake when you're meditating. When it's time to rest, sleep, that's fine. We don't force you to sleep just a few hours at night. You can sleep many hours if you need. But when it's time to train the mind, sitting, walking, then you try to be awake. But it's not just awake from sleepiness, that's one part of it. It's also awake from the effects of the mental defilements. Greed, anger, delusion. Why do we get angry? We could say it's because we're asleep. We don't see the harm of following angry thoughts, getting attached to an angry mood. At that moment, we're blind, we're asleep. We don't see it as suffering. We just think, oh, they did this, or this happened, that happened, and we get angry and think a lot of angry thoughts and maybe feel not very good inside. We're not mindful, we're not awake, so we get caught into our anger or our worries. Worries is the same. If you establish some awareness, some mindfulness, you wake up to the truth, you'll see worrying is suffering. Worrying about future, what's going to happen tomorrow, next year. Worry about ourselves, worry about our partner, worry about our children, worry about the world. Everyone says, oh, the world seems to be in a bad place. Well, the world is what you make of it. If you're always worrying, yeah, it will seem like a bad place because you're attaching to your worries. It's another form of sleepiness. But not sleepiness as in lying down asleep. Sleepiness as in being unaware to the state of your mind. So if you're caught into worries, you have to wake up from that and say, stop worrying about things you can't control. Stop worrying about things that haven't happened yet, the future, other places, other people. It doesn't help, it's just suffering. Greed is the same. You have to wake up to your greed. How much do we act out of our greed, our lust for things? We want to have things, own things, get more, always have more, get more. More money, more possessions, more power, more influence. Luang Por said it was a good teaching going to India, because when you're in India you see a lot of funerals there, and their funerals are very simple. Basically just put a corpse on a pile of wood and burn it, and often they're very public, their funerals. And they just let it burn and that's it. Often they don't even collect the ashes, because the ashes just go back to the earth. And Luang Por said this is a real teaching. It's what we call Satya Dhamma, Satya Dhamma, the truth. When you die, this body doesn't matter anymore to you. But our culture, society, our attachments often say, oh, we've got to have a big funeral, spend lots of money on a fancy funeral. Often people sit there at the funeral and think, oh, aren't the flowers beautiful? How much did they spend on the flowers? The food, the banquet that they have to have after the funeral. Fancy coffin, how fancy was the coffin? Maybe after the person is dead, then you have to have a nice grave or a nice headstone somewhere, or a plaque on a wall or something, some kind of monument to the dead person. So we spend all our time involved in these things. How much money involves, how much preparations, how many people came to the funeral. Some funerals, a lot of people, some funerals, hardly anyone comes or no one comes. All these externals we get caught up in, lost in. Sometimes even makes the news. You read a newspaper article about a funeral. How many people attended, how much it cost, all these things. The truth is, it's just a human being and their body has died, stopped working. They cremate them or bury them, and that's it. Goes back to the elements, go back to nature. And Luang Por was saying, we get so caught up in the world. That's not the higher mind. That's not awake to the truth. That's like sleepwalking or hypnotized. It's all about these external things, money and wealth and fame and fortune, all the sort of good things of the world that people wish for. But the actual truth of it is, human being is subject to old age, sickness, death. That's it, gone. When you're gone, it doesn't matter how many flowers you had at your funeral, how much was spent, who came. It doesn't matter, does it? So Luang Por said in India you get a real teaching, you see that, the simplicity of a funeral. It brings you right back to the truth. We don't own this world. That's the delusion, that's the sleepiness of the mind, the delusion of the mind thinks, oh, I own this world, my property, my piece of land, my house, or even my country. Sometimes we fight wars between countries. This is my land, oh, it's your land, my land, fight. None of us own the world, and when we die, you see that. A person dies, they can't have anything, they don't take anything with them. The higher mind recognizes that. So these three things, sense restraint, modesty and moderation in consumption, and dedication to wakefulness and the higher mind, these are what Luang Por has already started teaching since he's been here. He's only been here a few hours, and he teaches regularly, and I'm sure tomorrow he'll also give us a talk. But for now, I'll just pass these teachings on to you from him, and in a moment we'll end tonight's session.